All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's HBMA Live. Join me in welcoming Matt Seefeld to our HBMA Live today. Matt, thanks for spending a few minutes with us this afternoon.
Absolutely. No, I love it. It just turned noon here in California, so I'm ready for the afternoon to get going.
Perfect, perfect. Well, Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit? I mean, I've seen you speak at the HBMA several times, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your background for those of our listeners that might be new?
Yeah. So I've spent my entire career in healthcare revenue cycle, primarily focused in the consulting as well as the software development side. I started my career early on as a consultant, which actually helped in technology development because I knew when it comes to workflow automation and rapid intelligence around where you're losing money, it was really the utmost mission for me to do those things. I moved on and developed four workflow automation systems in my career. MetaVault, this is the fourth time I've done it. I've learned through painful 2 decades, I can say, plus experience that the PM systems, the EMR systems are never going to get there. They're never going to get to a point where they capture the structured data necessary to tell you the story of effectiveness, not production, but effectiveness of the staff that are still required to work claims, to pre-register, schedule visits, et cetera. And so, and what's interesting about the conference is, in September that I'll be speaking about is really the incentive-based revenue cycle concept. And in order to create a gamification or an incentive world for RCM staff, you got to know who's effective and who's not, which means you got to have the structured data available to tell that story. And so it's been an interesting journey for me over 2 decades. I've worked on the large ambulatory, large acute academic medical center side. I've worked throughout all of revenue cycle, including a 1.5 year stint in bed management on the inpatient floors, which was still probably one of my more favorite experiences, just to see the ebbs and flows of emergency rooms to PACUs to nursing units. And then I've spent a lot of my time, obviously, developing these software solutions that is really what the driver. COVID is aligned perfectly with the things that we're doing now, and it's also aligned perfectly with the challenges everybody's up against, which is I can't find people. They're more expensive because of wage wars. They all want to work from home. So how do you measure effectiveness in the home versus in an office with a cubicle? And then
Right.
it's the whole virtual communication. When you need something from somebody else, how do you get that information? How do you track it? How do you understand the chatter that's required to get your claims paid? And that drives margin. It's as simple as that. You reduce your labor dependence by having highly effective workforce, and you maximize your net collection rate. You're going to maximize your margin, which everyone says they want, but a lot of organizations are still not willing to make the technology commitment, and more importantly, the really forensic look at people and process and how they could make changes to that to align with the technology to get the result.
Right, right. So, and you've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but tell our viewers what they can kind of expect from your session this fall. I'm really excited about this one. It's a little bit different than what you've done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to the past, it's just framing up what I mean by workflow automation. What do I mean by structured data? We'll get into some concepts around data warehousing and things that are important because health systems, provider groups are pulling data from lots of disparate systems. But then you got to tap into those disparate systems in a meaningful way to drive intelligence, to drive effectiveness. So there'll be some framing up of that. We're going to focus a lot on the financial clearance piece. I call it the pre-service. How do you make sure that every scheduled visit that you control is cleared prior to service? So we'll talk a lot about that. Obviously, patient liability, high deductible plans will be a component there. And then we're going to really focus a lot on the incentive-based models, right? How do we now, and we're looking at it through gamification, gamify the experience of getting results with the minimal amount of work effort. And that's really going to be the big future for us. I think it's the big missing link in revenue cycle software to begin with. If you think about the employees that are being paid to do a job, right? It starts with them making sure they have incentives in place to not only retain them, but reward them. And that drives external service value, which is what the client or the customer experiences. And if those things work well, your revenue and profitability grow. And that's a model that's been around for 40 plus years, and that's a model that needs to be really looked at now in revenue cycle. So I think a lot of that piece, and then introducing some new themes around effective intelligence. That's really a big focus of Metabulb now. It's a big focus for me personally in my rev cycle career is looking at effective intelligence quotients, really understanding work effort to get the outcome you expect. And so it's going to be a little confrontational, and I like that about when I speak, because I'm too old and I guess some people would say jaded to not have some fun with the audience. But I hear a lot of people talk about RPA and AI and machine learning, but these folks, they don't actually understand where humans are still having to get involved and to what extent. And that's where we're starting. I'm starting from that end. And then I will evaluate whether there are RPA solutions or machine learning AI that'll help remove the dependence on labor there. So a lot of it's going to be around effective intelligence, which is a really cool idea that we've come up with, and a lot of models, we call them quotients, that we've developed to look at everything from zero touch rate, which is my claim went out the door and got paid, single human was involved. People can't answer that question. The normal PMEMRs can't answer that question.
Right. Well, that's exciting. It's such good things for us, as revenue cycle managers and, business owners of billing companies, to be thinking about all of those things to help us be more efficient in this fantastic labor market that we're all operating in. What are some of the key takeaways that you hope people leave your session with?
Yeah, I think in a minimum, I think it's number one is just an understanding that the transactional systems that they're using today, call them practice management EMRs, are not fit or set up to get to this level of analysis that looks at effectiveness of the labor pool. That would be my number one thing is that the people, and I'm getting the sense over the last year that people are really starting to now recognize that. They're like, hey, it's a great patient engagement solution, really cool EMR. It looks pretty on an iPad. But when it comes to holding people accountable for results for the services that I deliver and I'd like to get paid for correctly and timely with minimal amount of work effort, it's missing the mark. So that's probably number one. And then I think number two is it's also embracing this concept that if you have the right incentive models in place for your staff who are still touching things, right? They're still working, that your improvement to net collection rate and your decrease in labor costs will be accretive. And that's an idea that I've been thinking about for 15 years. And I really started to think about this back in the old academic medical center days where I'm working with these huge health systems. And I'm thinking, man, if you improve net collection rate 1% and you gave a fraction of that percent back to the staff delivering, maybe that net collection rate grows 2%. And then what would that year-over-year benefit be, right? So I think that, number one, the inadequacies of the technology that we've been given to do these jobs historically has to change. Number two is it's really looking at how incentive models can be built to really make sure that people who do their job correctly with the least amount of work effort get rewarded for it. And it's not just a pizza party or a gift card. It's more material than that, and it's tied to numbers that they can understand and interpret. The last thing is going to be making sure people understand that you cannot buy technology without the understanding that you may likely have to change your current processes and your current people and how people are aligned with process. That is something that frankly just blows my mind, that we sit at these trade shows with all these vendors. They have all these cool point solutions. They're like, hey, look at this ROI. You're going to get blah, blah, blah. Then we go in and the client's like, yeah, but I don't want to change this stuff. The technology won't drive the results for you, right? It may drive some. But if you want the ROI that you're being promised by all these cool booths that have cool stress balls and all these other gadgets and putting greens, et cetera, you've got to be willing to look at current process. That's the consultant in me. And that's where I had to start my career with an awesome firm, Stocking Up Associates, who still, in my opinion, is really what jump-started my entire legacy and career in rev cycle automation, is this concept that if you can't measure it, you can't improve on it, you can't act on it, right? You can't get the results. And so you got to be willing to look at process, and you have to be willing to make changes to that and people to align with the technology that you're purchasing with the hope that you're going to get the result.
Perfect.
And there'll be a few other things that, in the middle there. People who've heard me speak at HBMA know I kind of go off the racket a bit, but it's all good.
It's always a fun time, though. It's entertaining and definitely educational. I know from our spring meeting this year, there were definitely a number of things I took away that I hadn't really thought about before, and so I think you always bring thought-provoking ideas to make people question how are you doing things, why are you doing that way, and what could you do differently, and what would it look like for you. So
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I've found it 22 years in the making here that I like to be looked at more as, I mean, not a vendor. It's funny, vendor versus consultant, but I really, as more of a thought leader that is provocative because
mhm.
I've had to do this on my own. I mean, I built my own company from scratch in this space, and that was during the recession. So I had to get really, really nimble with what was valuable and what wasn't to just be relevant. And so, but I do like confrontational conversations too, because there's tons of great insights out there. I'm not the end all be all. And that's why I really like it when we can get engaged through questions. I always leave at least 10 minutes or more to talk about different things. And that's why I've always loved speaking at your show, because there is a lot of thought provoking. You're also, the billing companies have a special place here because, half our business is RCM as well, outsourcing. We don't get the dollar. We get a percentage of that dollar. So we better be highly lean, highly effective, highly virtual, and be getting a bang up results, or they're going to just swap us out for the next RCM company down the road. Right. And so it's very relevant speaking at HBMA, even more so than when I speak at like MGMA, where it's, you're speaking more to the provider groups. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be a great time. Well, Matt, thank you again for taking some time out of your day to meet with us and give us a sneak peek on your session this fall. And I look forward to your session.
Yeah, St. Louis. I'm looking forward
Yep.
to seeing you all.
Wonderful. Well, take care, Matt. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.